All right, what's up, family? King Isom in the building once again. I want to continue on with a series I'm beginning. It's called Managing Your Manhood. I already posted part one, and I hadn't given a title yet, but I think I'm going to roll with Managing Your Manhood. And this is going to be part two in that particular series. We're talking about, once again, the suspension of one Ime Udoka, the head coach of the Boston Celtics, and Stephen A. Smith on his show First Take is engaging Miss Malika Andrews about that situation. I would encourage you to go back and check out part one. It's already on my page. And without further ado, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in. At this point, Stephen A. Smith has finished speaking, and Miss Andrews comes in with her take.
Well, Molly, thank you. If I could first start with this. Stephen A., with all due respect, this is not about pointing the finger. Stop. What became apparent to me in this press conference is that we do not have all of the information here, and it was frustrating to me that the Celtics declined to elaborate or to give more specifics about what exactly the rule breaking was that led us to this point. So that I just want to get that out of the way first. But
okay, I'm going to stop it right there. I don't want to hear really all the stuff she has to say in between. But let me say this right here, brothers. Again, I'm talking to the kings of the earth, to the men. I want to use this segment to bring out a couple of different things. And there's so much I want to glean from it, but I want to be succinct in doing so. First of all, I want us to talk about how to deal with contention. Now, in this particular case, we're going to deal with contention with women, especially a particular type of woman. But this principle is actually interchangeable in dealing with anyone. But the reason why I want to use this one is because there is a way that women tend to contend with men that is different than when you deal with men. So I want to highlight some ways as men to deal with that in a proper fashion. And we're going to go ahead and move a little bit further in order to get to that particular point. And y'all bear with me. I'm getting a little bit better in my production skills. But let's get to the main point that Miss Malika wanted to make to express her disdain about the whole
that was
issue.
clearly necessary in this situation. But the fact that it was able to go on all day, the fact that we are sitting here debating whether somebody else should have been suspended or not, we are not here, Stephen A., to further blame women. That is not why we are here.
Okay, and that's the end of her comments there. I'll leave it at that. I think it speaks for itself. I want to get to the response by Mr. Stephen A. Smith. Hear me, brothers. You have to understand the nature of who you're dealing with. And from my perspective, again, on this channel, Perfecting Your Pursuit, when I speak, King Isom, who's at your service, ready to teach, I'm speaking from my perspective. And I do so unapologetically. And from my perspective, whenever you're dealing with what I call a liberal, so-called black woman, you have to understand the nature of who you're dealing with, and you have to respond in kind. And let's look at how Stephen A. Smith responds to a woman, taking that tone and tenor with him on his show as if she's some kind of authority to tell him what to do. Watch his response.
First of all, let me be very clear. I don't appreciate where you're going with that. I'm not blaming anybody but Ime Udoka. He deserves, the fact of the matter is, I've said he deserved to be fired if they were going to fire him. If you're not going to fire him, then don't fire him.
Hold on right there. I like how he handled that because number one, he did not allow himself to get emotional. And he did not go with anything ad hominem, which means a personal attack. And hear me, beloved, that's how I like to move here. You'll often hear me say that when I deal with these different issues, I'm using them as teaching tools. In order for me to do so, I stick with the image and the archetype. I don't get personal. There may be a time where I may use Stephen A. Smith in a blunder that he has made. So for me, it's not personal. I deal with the image and the archetype that is being set before us because, hear me, brothers, the enemy is using the media to train you. He's establishing images and archetypes, and I may take some time later on in another teaching to explain what I mean by these different terms that I use. But for now, keep in mind that in my mind, I deal with image and archetype. I like how Stephen A. Smith said, first of all, I don't appreciate where you're going with that. And then he immediately left it. And he began to lay out his logic, his methodology. He began to recount systematically what his points were. Because hear me, beloved, when you're making valid points, you don't have to go tit for tat about the silliness. You don't have to get in the emotions with the woman you're dealing with. Stick with the logic and move from there. I appreciate how he's doing that. But watch how the woman tries to interject as he's laying out his points respectfully. Keep in mind, when she came onto his show, disrespectfully, in my opinion, he said, I'll let you speak and I'll address it later. Watch how she responds to him as he respectfully begins to lay out his defense.
My issue is all of this being publicized. The point that I'm trying to make is just
You
like
don't
you're
think
not
someone would
mentioning.
notice if Ime Udoka was not at-
Excuse me. I listened to you. You're the one telling me to stop on my show. It ain't happening.
Oh, I love it, brother. Hear me, brothers. Hear me, kings. That's something that anybody who has dealt with one of these TMWs, what's a TMW? It's a typical modern woman who's operating under a typical liberal feminist mindset. You can be as calm and collected and cool as ever in listening to her. When you begin to speak, she immediately begins to want to interject and talk because her goal is not to engage in a sensible discussion to come to a logical conclusion. Her goal is to get you to shut up and listen to her point of view, bow down and go ahead and step and fetch. And what tends to happen if you're not a man who are operating in your masculine frame, and also, I'm going to talk about this, if you're not operating from your position of power, you will find yourself dragged into what I call hyena warfare. You've heard those hyenas. Some of the most irritating animals on the planet. You will find yourself engaging in hyena warfare and getting into the emotional. Brothers, that's a complete waste of your time. What Stephen A. Smith said, he said, excuse me, nah. Why is he doing that? Because that's his show and he's operating from a place of power. He didn't go back and forth. He let it be known, look here, it's going to be my way or you got to go. And hear me, beloved, that's how I move. I do not lower myself to go back and forth with a woman. That is beneath me. Let me say it 2 more times. I do not lower myself to go back and forth with a woman. That is beneath me. When I say back and forth, I'm talking about in a contentious manner. Not talking about a healthy dialogue, not talking about a fruitful conversation. But when I have any sense of disrespect and disregard for me and who is standing before her, King Isa, I shut that down immediately. You're no longer worthy to be in my presence. You got to go. Respect is just a minimum. Shout out to Lauryn Hill. And so you need to begin, if you're not already, to operate in that manner. I'm not going to be disrespectful. I'm going to be dismissive. You are dismissed. The conversation is over. That's how I go about demanding respect. And I'm not going to be rude about it, hopefully. Let me get back to Stephen A. I don't want to go on a tangent right there. Let's keep moving here. I like how he said, you the one coming on my show. Say it again, Stephen A. We're going to move on. I don't want to linger too long.
It's
You don't think someone would notice if Ime Udoka was not at...
Excuse me. I listened to you. You're the one telling me to stop on my show. It ain't happening.
And that's the bottom line. It ain't happening. Keep going, Stephen.
Okay, that's number one. Number two, I've already said he deserves to be fired, or he deserves to be there and handle it internally and privately. If you're not going to handle it privately, if you're going to publicize it in that fashion, then obviously it provokes everybody wanting to know, okay, well, who are the parties involved?
Okay, and I don't want to linger there. What Stephen A. Smith once again is echoing, he is saying that the way they handle that is not proper. And I want to go ahead and stream forth a little bit more, but I want to bring out a point here as well. What you're going to notice is when it comes to Stephen A. Smith, I'm not talking about Stephen A. Smith, the individual. I'm talking about, in this particular case, Stephen A. Smith, the image and archetype, a so-called black male. Notice how when he lays out his points, he is showing care and concern for everyone involved. First of all, he holds Ime Udoka, that brother's name escapes me, brother, forgive me. He holds the coach accountable by saying, you know what, it was wrong. Okay, then he says, let me examine how he is being handled, because he's also concerned about how the brother is being done. Either you fire him or you handle it privately. And then he mentioned earlier in the segment, if you do it in the right way and list the name of the person he was engaging with, you can also protect the women who were unfairly drug into this mess. That's how men think. Men think about the whole because we are kings. And kings are concerned about the kingdom. We think about all parties involved. We have a macro level understanding because we were created that way. To protect, to provide. In order to protect and to provide, you have to also be able to prophesy, to be a prophet who speaks up, who can glean and understand what's going on at a macro level from a three-dimensional perspective. That's why men are called to lead nations. But notice what the woman is focused on, especially the TMW, the typical modern woman. Her focus is herself. Now, somebody not gonna like this, but hear me, beloved, I don't give a damn. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. The typical modern woman. I'm not talking about the virtuous woman. I'm not talking about the feminine woman. I'm not talking about the mature in mind woman. Shout out to you with your gorgeous self. We love that type of woman. But the typical liberal so-called black woman specifically, now we love you too. But it's just time for you to get a little chastisement here because many of you are out of control. The typical modern woman is self-centered. Everything is about her. And hear me, I'm going to show you this, beloved. Whenever you see her begin to feign or have an outward display of concern about somebody else, you better believe when it comes down to these TMWs, it's only to get attention to draw back to herself. They'll talk about George Floyd as if they're concerned about the deaths of the so-called black man. But you better believe it's all in an effort to siphon the energy of the moment to bring it back to someone on the corner of the woman. Understand that. I'll make that plain to you, but I digress. I want you to keep that in mind. The man is concerned about the whole. The woman, unless she has matured, unless she has begun to operate in her creation role, in her feminine frame, in her nurturing, selfless frame, she still operates in the base level of her existence, and that's her self-centered frame. It's all about me, and that's what you hear from Malika Andrews. Don't talk about the woman because you protect women at all costs. No, sir. And I like how Stephen A. Smith dealt with that. Well, I'm kind of hyped today. Let me move on here. Let me see if I can glean a little bit from the end. Hold on one second.
This kind of stuff has existed in professional sports for many years. My whole point is that, excuse me, make sure that you handle it in the same fashion it has always been handled. You could have fired him, and then we could have speculated till the cows come home, but he's gone. But to keep him there, keep him employed, but in the same breath, suspend him for a year, then also that year is indefinite. That is the issue that I have. Nobody's trying to protect Ime Udoka, and certainly nobody is trying to protect, is to excoriate the women involved or anything like that. I'm talking about how things of this matter are usually handled from an HR perspective.
Okay, come on, brother. So I like the point he's making. I'm going to have to wrap up with him. I don't want to go over 15 minutes here.
Anybody
kind of
deserves
already
to be
there.
attacked. It's Ime Udoka for putting himself in this position.
Now, I'm going to hit this point right here. I'm going to close it down for this session right here. Man, I've been enjoying myself. Stephen A. Smith, and I'm not trying to read too much into what he's saying here, but notice what he says here, because what can tend to happen, especially on these public platforms, man, I'm running out of time here, is the man can come out assertive, but especially as man, this is so rich. I got to hit this point and I'll conclude here. Especially as a so-called black man. One of my principles, shout out to my brother, Dr. B, he told me once, he said, just encouraging me, he said, as so-called black male leaders, we have to be cognizant when we are doing discipline or communicating that we're not coming off too strong. And that's because the image and likeness of the so-called black man has been managed for so long by other thans, that when a man begins to speak with power and authority, and some of it's just natural, when you are a king, when you are a lion, I'm talking about a real so-called black man operating in your frame, a man like me, intelligent, wise, experienced, to God be the glory, getting to the paper a little bit, confident, raised by strong men and raised by a woman who understood and respected the masculine frame as well. When you're operating like that, you can be intimidating. And then when you step into this feminist society that is hell bent on glorifying and worshiping the mother goddess concept, whenever you address women and holding them accountable, there's a tendency to tread lightly. I can somewhat understand that. But I want you to listen to what Stephen A. Smith says here, because in your attempt to tread lightly, in your attempt to move tactfully, you can get into defense mode. Now, Stephen A. Smith came out in not attack mode, but he confronted the issue. But then he begins to kind of retreat, realizing, wait a minute, I got my producers, I got to think about the public. Hold on here. And look what he says. I'll conclude with this.
I'm not trying to attack anybody. And if anybody deserves to be attacked, it's Ime Udoka for putting himself in this position.
Hold on right there. I want to go ahead and wrap it up here. He says, and again, I'm not reading into it too much to judge his motivation or even exactly what he meant. But he did say, if anyone deserves to be attacked, it's Ime Udoka. Words are powerful, friends. I'll conclude with this. Why does he deserve to be attacked? We're going to talk about this. This is going to have to give me a third segment here, folks. Y'all bear with me here. Why does Ime Udoka deserve to be attacked for what he did? I may get into, it's wrong and this and this and that. There'll be some other reports coming out. I may address that in part 3. But as I come to a close, brothers, when you're managing your manhood, you have to understand that's really the sentiment of this society. That the so-called black man in general and the so-called black man specifically and men in general. Hey, when you do something, you deserve to be attacked. Again, I'm not saying that Stephen A. Smith, it may be a poor choice of words, but hear me, that is a true statement as it relates to the image and archetypes put forth in this society. That when you do something that can be considered a foul, you deserve to be attacked. I'm gonna tell you what Ime Udoka deserves if he violated company policy. He deserves to get whatever punishment anyone else would get from that company. That's what he deserves, and it appears he's already gotten that. So why does he need to be attacked? He didn't break any laws. Now, it may be, it's a moral issue, sure, but he didn't break any laws. So why does he deserve to be attacked for what the position he put himself in? Why? That's personal. It shouldn't have even been put out there. Hear me, brothers. You need to understand as a man, as a king in this earth, there is a total lack of honor and respect for the image which you hold. What image is that? That's the image of Almighty God. The man was created in the image of Almighty God. And hear me, I mention image and archetype so much because that's the root cause of it all. It's the image you hold. You don't even realize that you have people who envy you, who are jealous of you. And the more successful you become, the more aware you become, the more you begin to manifest your masculine frame, the greater the envy, the greater the jealousy. And they will cloak and cover that envy and jealousy with some kind of righteous moral position. But in reality, folks, it's envy, it's jealousy. And the greater you get, like Ime Udoka, the greater the attack if you happen to stumble and fall. I want to encourage you, brothers. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up right here. We got to come back with a part 3, man. I went too long already. I want to encourage you, brothers, man, to be encouraged. Manage your manhood because you are the image of Almighty God in the earth. The man was made first. I'm talking Bible right now. Some of you brothers may not believe in the Bible. I understand that, but King Isom does. So let me go ahead and talk a little bit. The man was made first. You are the image of Almighty God. And just like the Most High God, the maker of heaven and earth, made everything, look at the civilizations, look at the societies, look at the governments, look at the technology. Who is primarily responsible for creating, cultivating, and perpetuating it all? Men. And in the words of Birdman, even though I think rappers are trash, in the words of Birdman, put some respect on my name. Love you, brothers. Be encouraged. Shout out to you. And remember these 2 words, kings. Rule well. Shalom.
I've made that very clear.
Hey, I hope I did.